Hey folks, Matthew Weiss here, WeissAdvice.com and Weiss Advice here on YouTube. In this video, we are going to be discussing 3 companies with 3 products and whether or not they are worth it. We are going to be talking about acoustic solution products and whether or not they're worth the money. Do they work? Let's get into it. In order to start, we need to discuss what even is acoustics. When we talk about acoustics, we are talking about the way sound behaves in a space. And when we're talking about it from the perspective of recording something, we're usually talking about 2 major categories. One is going to be our reverb decay time, and the other one is going to be comb filtering. Now, chances are you probably have a good idea what the first one is. If we're recording in a church or a big old marble foyer of some rich people's house or whatever it is, we're going to hear an audible tail. We're going to go, ah, and we're going to hear, ah. And sometimes that can be cool, but a lot of the times we don't want that in our recordings. Now, what is that other one? Comb filtering. Well, sometimes we think recording in a smaller space is better because we don't get that kind of effect. But the thing is that energy is still there. It's just that the energy is condensed. And when that energy is condensed and folding back on itself in, a very small space, there is this thing called frequency cancellation that happens. It's typically fairly broadband, and what's really happening is bits of frequency information is getting raked out of the frequency spectrum, like somebody took a comb and filtered the frequency spectrum with that comb. Comb filtering. This is the dance for comb filtering. Yeah, okay. So comb filtering bad. It makes things sound cheap. It particularly has this effect of making things sound both thin and muddy at the same time, and you hear it and you're like, how is this both thin and muddy? Is that possible even? Comb filtering. So when we are designing our acoustics, when we're working out our acoustics, we probably want to cut down on the reverb decay time. We also want to eliminate as much comb filtering as possible. How do we do that the right way? Well, the right way is to actually build the room in a way that mitigates these issues. But let's assume that we're not building our own spaces here, because that is a very, very expensive endeavor and one that I am only so qualified to speak on. The next way that we're doing it is usually topical acoustic treatments, which means diffusion panels. Diffusion panels meaning sound hits the panel, and instead of echoing right back, it scatters. Or absorption panels. When sound hits that absorption panel, instead of coming back as sound, it actually dissipates as heat and no longer exists as a reflection in the room. If you look back here, these are acoustic panels. I have them all over this space because I want to reduce the amount of reflections that are bouncing around this room, thus reducing the amount of comb filtering. And guess what? This stuff actually works. However, there is a trade-off, and the trade-off is you're either going to be spending time and effort in building your own, or you're going to be spending a good amount of money buying somebody else's. I have a mix of both in here. I have a lot of DIY acoustics that I've done myself, and I think that it's great doing that. I actually built my bass traps, and they were too effective. I ended up running off about 16 dB of sub-frequency by building really, really good bass traps. So I've learned a lot about that, and I'm glad I did it, but yeah, I gotta go back and modify it a little bit because I went a little overboard. Then I also have these that I bought from GIK Acoustics. Now, not the cheapest solution to get enough of them, but saves the time, effort, and fiberglass rashes, that's for sure. But we also have some products that, in theory, don't cost a lot of money, don't take a lot of time and effort, and are effective. The holy triumvirate. Effectiveness, money, time, right? And it's always a balance between the 3. So let's start with our first product here, and that is Auralex foam panels. In this Worth It series, I am trying to speak honestly from my point of view, my opinion as an experienced recordist. My credentials, about 20 years of recording, about 15 professional years, multi-platinum plaque, contributed to some Grammy-nominated projects, Spelman Awards. I've been recording a lot. I know a lot about recording, so this is my opinion, but it's an educated opinion, okay? Let's burn a bridge here. Auralex is shit. Auralex does not do what it says it's going to do. Yes, Auralex will absorb some stuff that's above 1K, and actually above 1K, Auralex starts to get pretty effective. The higher up you go, the more effective it gets, until you get to like the super high frequencies, and then some weird stuff happens. But if you have pings and things, high-pitched resonances, yeah, Auralex can be a good, quick, yeah, let's get rid of this. Sure. Where Auralex does not do much of anything is when we start getting below 500 hertz. Once we get into the low mids, center mids, low mids, and then down to the bass frequencies, Auralex is basically the same as air. It really does almost nothing. So if you've ever been in like one of those radio station booths, or like, you know, your buddy's I Made a booth where there's like Auralex everywhere, and you talk and it sounds like really weird. It's like weirdly dead, but also weirdly live at the same time. And your brain goes, this is a strange room. Yes, that's what's happening. Auralex is pretty useless for the fundamental frequencies of most sources. Remember, middle C on a piano is 264 hertz. So there's your middle C. Most of the fundamental sounds that are being produced in a record are, you know, somewhere below that 1K range, where Auralex stops becoming effective pretty quick. So aside from the fact that it doesn't really work very well, it's also ugly, like super ugly. Look at that bridge. Look at the blaze on that bridge. That's okay. I would never endorse this company anyway. I think it's snake oil. Funny enough, snake oil actually does have some medicinal properties. It just doesn't do what the snake oil salesman would say it would do. And that's exactly what Auralex is. It's literally snake oil. It does something for a little bit, but very little for everything else. Okay, bridge burned. Let's move on. Let's talk about the SE Reflexion Filter, and I assume it's pronounced that way because it's spelled with an X instead of a CT. So, the SE Reflexion Filter. What is it? Well, it's absorptive material in layers, meaning it's got different densities that are then put on top of each other, and it's arranged in a semicircular configuration, a concave configuration, I think. Yeah, concave. And it has a metal grating behind it supporting it. What is the idea here? Well, the idea is that, let's say I'm recording my voice, and I speak into a microphone, sound comes out, and instead of getting into the room and bouncing around and getting back into the microphone, it's going to hit that absorption layer, and it's going to get absorbed. And then it's not going to bounce around the room, thus solving all of the problems. No more reverb decay time, no more comb filtering. We won, right? Well, not exactly. There's a few issues here. I'm going to talk about where it doesn't quite work, but then kind of circle back, because actually I don't dislike this product. The reason why it doesn't exactly work is because usually when we're recording in cardioid, meaning we're picking up the things that are in front of the microphone, not behind. We're rejecting the behind stuff. So it's the reflections that are coming from behind the source that are getting into the microphone that are problematic. Now, if I'm making sounds with my mouth, which is what I do, my sound is not moving in a planar way. It's not two-dimensional. It's not just hitting the little absorption thingy. It's going this way, it's going that way, it's going this way. Yeah, sound kind of flowers out, and then we'll actually change the direction a little bit, going around my head. So sound is going to not just get into that absorption material. And also, when the contact impedance starts to change enough, meaning when you start getting to the very tops and sides of that SE Reflexion filter, the sound is actually going to crawl around it. It's not going to go into the absorption material. The sound has that weird way of walking around corners and things like that. So a lot of sound is still going to get into the room, it's still going to cause those reflections, and it's still going to get into the capsule of the microphone. In addition to that, the absorption material is not 100% effective. That's just the nature of absorption material. None of it really is. That's why there's grating in the metal that's supporting it, because if it was just a sheet of concave metal, you would have a comb filtering nightmare. Everything that doesn't go through, that doesn't get absorbed, is going to reflect off of that metal. So you have to put in those gratings. And so now everything that doesn't get absorbed through the singular pass is going to then go out into the space that we are in. Now, it is going to absorb a fair amount of it. Credit where credit is due. It just won't absorb all of it. In fact, when we're mounting actual absorption panels, the best practice is to leave an air gap. This way, the sound will go through the absorption material, and what doesn't get absorbed will reflect off of the boundary and then hit the absorption material again. We don't get that. We only get one pass through this absorption material. It does absorb. It does work. It's going to reduce that sound energy that is directly coming out of our face, and then therefore reduce the amount of sound energy in the room. But is it going to do it 100%? Not even close. If I were to put a percentage on it, and by the way, this is not scientific, this is just like an estimate based off of what I've heard, it's like 33%, which isn't bad. I do have to say, that really legitimately isn't bad. So where does the SE Reflexion Filter fit into this? Well, if we need a quick fix for something, it can be effective for smaller spaces. That's been my experience. In larger spaces, I've found that an SE Reflexion filter does not really do much. Maybe a little bit, but you still hear the reverb tails pretty distinctly. In smaller spaces, you don't really hear the reverb tails as much. The comb filtering is the problem. And the more you can reduce the energy in the room, the less that comb filtering is going to be a problem. So if we're talking about a poorly treated or completely untreated small space, an SE Reflexion filter is actually, I said it like normal and abnormal at the same time. An SE Reflexion filter is actually going to do something, and it's going to be something positive. And so I would prefer to have it than not have it in that case. Ultimately, I would prefer just to have a treated room. Notice I do not have a Reflexion filter here. I have a treated room. That's optimal. But a treated room is also a lot more expensive. So I think that this product is actually okay. I think that in certain cases, it's worth having. Yeah. Okay, now let's move on to the Kaotica eyeball, or as I like to call it, the microphone condom. Yes, let's stick our microphone in a Nerf ball and get rid of reflections that way. Okay. As a general principle, you do not want to stick a sock on your microphone and record it. You're going to have a sound that sounds like it was recorded in a sock. The Kaotica eyeball is like a really, really nice sock. So what is it doing? Well, on the good side, it is really cutting down on reflections. That's for sure. If I'm going around traveling and I find myself in like some echoey cavern, like Batman's hideout or some stuff like that, I would be pretty happy to have a Kaotica eyeball. I've recorded in a lot of weird places. I've recorded on the side of a mountain, outdoors. I've recorded on a thatch hut on the beach. I've recorded in countless hotel rooms, and those hotel rooms vary from things that sound good at some time and then sometimes just horrendous. So I can see a merit to the Kaotica eyeball in terms of like if you're traveling around and you want it for safety purposes in case you need a tight sound, but you don't have control over the space at all. I think that that's where the Kaotica eyeball shines. If I have control over the space, though, I honestly think that it's a little bit of a waste of money. Like, yes, it's a lot more money to actually treat your space, but I feel like at that point, like, you might as well go into it because the trade-offs with the Kaotica eyeball are there. You're making a compromise. With the Kaotica eyeball, there is some evenly distributed comb filtering around the mids. It's not bad. It's certainly better than what you would expect for a sphere on a microphone. By the way, as far as terrible shapes for acoustics, spheres are the worst. So for putting a ball on a microphone, the minimal comb filtering is pretty impressive. Credit where credit is due. What I don't like is that it also feels like the very top end just gets lopped off, like a steep low pass filter just hits it, and it feels like there's no air in the capture at all anymore, and I don't like that. So when you put a Kaotica eyeball on a microphone, you are degrading the quality of the microphone. You are cheapening the sound. The only question is the damage the Kaotica eyeball doing better or worse than what the actual space you are in is doing? And you have to make that judgment call. So in general, I would not recommend a Kaotica eyeball. I don't think you're going to get a better sound out of it in most cases, especially when you have control over the space itself. Sometimes even when you don't have control over the space itself, you can find a spot in the room where you're going to get a better sound than putting the microphone condom on the mic. Did I just say it's better to raw dog it with the microphone than to put a condom on? Oh no. Wait, we're talking about acoustics, so let's stick to that. But in a pinch, it might be the better choice. So I don't know what star ratings to give any of this stuff. I kind of threw the star rating thing aside for this one. But yeah, generally don't recommend. But if you're traveling around a lot, then might be worth having. Okay, ramble over. If you like this video, hit that like button. If you want to catch more videos like this, hit subscribe with the bell notification. And you better do it because we already passed 10K. If you weren't part of the first 10K, you missed out on the honor and the thrills of being within the first 10K. Hey, let's go to 25, baby. Let's go. And lastly, you know what we say here at Weiss Advice. We are musicians. Sound is our instrument. And I will catch you next time. I'm so dumb.